Hey everybody, welcome to episode 84 of Is That Normal podcast, and today we're going to talk about superpowers.
Yes. So Randall, are you a superhero fan?
I am. I have to make a confession though. I'm kind of like old school superhero fan.
Oh yeah.
I have a hard time like following the whole the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It got to a point where I kept up to a certain point, and now it's beyond me.
It's because they want to make money, and so they keep making the same movie over and over again. And I do get that, but I was a superhero comic book huge fan nerd from way back, and I had read comic books growing up, and then about middle school I got into serious collecting. Went to comic book stores and bought all these back issues and made complete sets, and read all these storylines, and it is cool. This the Marvel Cinematic Universe is taking over the world thing.
Yeah,
really does. A lot of it is, some of it's only in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but they're bringing all these elements of these storylines from old comic books in, and so for me, I'm like, this is so cool. This is so and so, and then start talking to people, and their eyes glaze over, and so. But yeah, no, I'm super into it. But it leads to this great question.
Yeah.
If you would have a superpower, what would it be?
Boy, the ability to fly or, transport yourself from one place to the other, I feel like would be pretty awesome.
Yeah. So, yeah, that is pretty good. There's a lot of good ones. There's lots that would be beneficial, but I always go to the telekinesis, telepathy, using my mind to know and do things that nobody else can do. Partly because Professor Xavier from the X-Men is the coolest guy that ever lived, and even though he's not a person, so he didn't live. But anyway, but when you watch Patrick Stewart be him, you think he is, and so, but yeah, so I've always that's always been my thing. Super strength is cool, but man, if I know what you're thinking, I can make you do what I want you to do. You know what I'm saying.
I'm with you, man.
Yeah. So, but as we think about parenting, and what we talk about in our podcast, I think that might change our mind about what we would want our superpower to be. Maybe not mine. Yeah. Maybe I do want to know what my kids are thinking, or maybe I don't. Anyway, but yeah.
So, yeah, absolutely. So, being a parent, in a way, it is kind of like being a superhero, and you got to develop your powers to be able to be a great parent, and to be able to use all of the tools that you have to be able to figure out how to navigate raising kids, because that in and of itself is one of the most difficult things that anybody's going to do. So you got to use all the spidey senses.
Yes, yeah. And a couple of others I thought that'd be really good. So there's this one guy called the Multiple Man, and so he can make duplicates of himself to do tasks he didn't like to do.
I like that.
That would be great as a parent, wouldn't it? And then the other one is to go back in time and change things that you didn't like. That would be another good one.
That would be
as
a good
parent. One. Yeah. So, but today we're going to talk about one particular superpower that every parent actually does have the ability to have without being bitten by a radioactive hamster. And we're going to talk about empathy and its power today.
Well, welcome back. We are so glad you've joined us on the Is That Normal podcast, episode 84. And we want to connect and help parents as they raise teens and young adults in the crazy world that we live in. And if you missed our previous episode from 2 weeks ago, one of the ways that we want to do that is we've put a survey out there that we would love for you just to take a few minutes to fill out. And it's really just a way for us to maybe gauge what we are doing well, and what we can, maybe areas we can hit on that we haven't, and ways that we can just continue to kind of tailor this podcast to be something that is useful and beneficial for those of you out there that are trying to raise kids, and specifically young adults. And so if you haven't done that, there'll be a link to that we'll include, and we would just love for you to take just a few minutes to do that. It's pretty simple and straightforward. Won't take very long to complete, but that would be great, and we would greatly appreciate that. Yeah. So, but today we want to empower you with empathy.
Yes.
So what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so empathy is our ability to put ourselves in another person's shoes so that we can gain perspective on where they're at, what they're feeling, what they're experiencing, where they're trying to go. And and it's different from sympathy. Sympathy is a feeling or an intellectual understanding of another person's position, but empathy isn't just emotion, it's action. It's something that moves me to do something differently. And Fuller Institute boils it down to this equation: empathy equals notice plus care. Notice plus care.
So notice plus care. So two different components to that. So maybe let's unpack that just a little bit about what that means and how those two things have to come together to help us be empathetic.
Yeah. So notice is this first step, which answers one of the biggest questions that young people and really all people are asking, which is, where do I fit in? So it's that somebody sees me, understands me, values me, and appreciates me. And to do that, it's going to take us being good listeners, which is something we talk about a lot here on the podcast, is that we have a lot that we need to say and we want to direct, but we can't just information download and our kids assimilate that and become a part of the Borg and do what we want them to do. We've got to figure out how to address the issues that they're facing, answer the questions that they're asking. And so that's going to take some time listening and actually talking to young people. Sometimes we like to observe them like they're in a zoo and notice the things that they do and talk about what we like and don't like.
Yeah.
But do we actually cross the barrier and go and talk and listen? And so notice is huge for young people who are trying to figure out their place in this world. I mean, that's what we're all are doing, but particularly in that adolescent stage, moving from child to adult, they're trying to figure out, who am I? Where do I belong? What am I supposed to do? And so we've really got to be a part of that process. I like what New York City church planner Mike Park says. He says, being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, they're almost the same. And this whole conversation for me leads me to think about the people who have noticed me in my life. So for you, Randall, who are some people who noticed you?
Man, especially in the age range that we're talking about, that was huge to me, is to feel like I had somebody who actually was listening. And my grandmother was one of those people that would sit and just ask questions, and when you answered, they weren't glazed over or thinking about something else, would remember that. But even today, it really is, I think that listening and really doing that is a skill that has to be developed.
Yes.
I had this crazy experience the other day with a vendor that I work with through work, that I deal with semi-regularly, but he's an older gentleman. I know he's a great Christian man, but the guy deals with, tons of other people. And I just see him on occasion. And I went in there the other day to pick something up, and he's like, how's your nephew doing? It ought to be about his birthday. So I had told him, my nephew, who's just turned 2 years old, around the time he was born, I happened to be in there and we were talking and something came up about that. 2 years later, that we have not talked about that subject, but 2 years later, he remembered it was about that time of year and that I had a nephew born, and just thought to ask about him and how he was doing, and it just blew my mind, that somebody, that somebody cared enough, but to listen and remember those details, that's a skill, really.
Man, and that, we'll get to this in a minute, but I mean, that shows that care component.
Absolutely.
Like because he remembered that, knew something personal and significant about your family, that made you feel valued, that made you feel cared for.
Absolutely.
And so that's where we have to go. But to do that, we've got to be good listeners.
Yeah.
And we've got to be investigating what's going on with people in order to get to that stage. And so, so that's, that first step in noticing is learning to ask good questions, be a good listener, take note of those kind of things. One of the best questions we can ask young people is, well, it's not really a question, it's a statement, but tell me more.
Yeah.
So when they say something or we notice something that they mention that kind of catches our notice, it's good to say, so tell me more about what you meant by that, or tell me more why you care about that, or tell me more what that means to you. And then that's going to draw out some more of the deeper heart issues of things that matter to them and that they're thinking about. Some of the worst questions or statements that we can make, though, are things like, why would you do that or think that? Which can sometimes be our tendency when they take us off guard with stuff. Another bad question is when are you going to fix that? And that's a part of our struggle, I think, as humans, particularly as we get to be adults who've got very full schedules, and particularly even with our kids who we've got this expected outcome of. We want to look at this as transactional and that communicates not empathy, not notice, not care. Right. That communicates what I think is more important than what you think. Yeah. But really the problem isn't about fixing a problem. It's usually about understanding how they're feeling and what they're experiencing as they go through these stages of life. And so that leads us to that second part. So that's notice. Yeah. But then the second part is care.
So how do we do that part?
Well, we invest. That we make a concerted effort to say, I'm going to make what's going on in this person's life and what matters to them my business. That's what empathy becomes. And so we learn what's important to our kids. We follow up with them and we ask those questions like, hey, I know that was important to you, or that was coming up, or that, how did that go? That's kind of what your friend did for you, that vendor did for you. We wait for them, wait with them through the hard things of life, as they are struggling. We just let them know we're going to still be here. Even though life may be difficult right now, we're going to be here. We let them know they're not alone. We get to know what matters to them, what bothers them, what they're proud of. It's this process of seeking to understand who they are, not just trying to complete tasks.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the barriers to that happening?
Well, one barrier I see for myself and a lot of adults is our own perceived experiences. We often get to thinking like, when I was your age, this is the way I was. Why aren't you like that? Yeah. Or the other side of that is like, you're so different and your generation is so different from me. I can't even understand where you're coming from. And so those can be some really negative viewpoints that we will struggle with. And one of the ways that we can avoid that is sometimes just rewinding our story. And really taking some time to think back about, what was I really experiencing, and what were my struggles, and what were my obstacles when I was their age. And if we really take time and think, we're going to find out that maybe it isn't as different as we think, or even if they are, that we'll have empathy, because while their problems may be different than mine, I really wanted someone to notice and understand me at that time, and I was frustrated when they didn't.
That basic need for that is still the same.
Yeah, exactly. And then also another challenge in all of this is our own preferences. One thing I've tried to do, and I challenge parents to do, is when you see something that's new or confusing or offensive that kids are doing, rather than that knee-jerk reaction, take time to ask the question. First of all, why are they doing that, thinking that, believing that? But also, why am I reacting that way? And take some time at least to take a step back and maybe gain some perspective. A lot of times what we'll find out is kids are doing these things just simply because they're confused. They're looking to be valued. They're looking to be noticed, which is, that we can help them with that if we realize that that's the reason behind some of these things. So,
yeah, absolutely. So what happens when we gain the superpower of empathy?
I believe that we will have a deeper love and influence over the lives of the young people in our sphere of influence, whether it's our kids or other young people around us, that'll lead us to care for them, to care for their outcome, to care for how they feel, to care for where they feel belonging at, and I think it really will cause us to come alongside them better when we start looking at it that way.
That really is a superpower. I mean, if we can achieve that point in our lives, that's
our goal. That's our goal.
Absolutely.
Really.
So, any last thoughts as we wrap up?
Fuller Youth Institute is somebody we've mentioned a lot. We've highlighted some of their resources. They have been putting out great content concerning these particular type of issues, how to ask good questions, how to show empathy over the last several years. And so if you haven't already, I'd encourage you to check out some of those resources. They've written some good books on this. They've written a book called Growing Young, which is about how churches are impacting young people's lives, Growing With, how parents can impact people's lives, and 3 Big Questions, which we'll put links on our paged all of these, but 3 big questions is just unpacking a lot of this. What are the big questions kids are asking, and how does Jesus give better answers, and how can we help them understand that? Or you can just go check them out online at fulleryouthinstitute.org, and they've got lots of great content, links to those books, blog posts, and lots of resources for parents.
We reference them a ton on here, but that's because they put out great stuff.
They really do.
So our 2 takeaways today is the first is to start to develop that superpower of noticing and caring this week in the lives of your kids. And the second is just to connect with us online.
Yep.
Be abnormal.